So, Orwell is cancelled, finally. The snake finally got around to the portion of its own tail that contained Orwell. Orwell lived for a long time on the left, right? Because when society was more traditional, Orwell was a left-winger. And then the left kept going and going and going and going and going. And now finally we have arrived at the point where Orwell was a racist misogynist and needs to be cancelled. So for anyone who doesn't know, we've covered a lot of George Orwell's work because while George Orwell, of course, called himself socialist and was very active in left-wing politics and movements and wrote a lot about this, there was something else in Orwell that was a traditional Englishman and very sensitive to what was happening in the country and not just ideological. And you see this, of course, most prominently, I would say, in 1984, which is, of course, critique of leftism generally, which is why the party is called INGSOC. You see this in Animal Farm, which is a critique of Stalinism. And you see this in The Road to Wikipedia as well. But more on that, in his Notes on Nationalism, he has quite a nuanced view of what nationalism could mean or not mean, which is excellent. And his essay on shooting an elephant, which is when he was a colonial officer in Burma, is a very fascinating thing and one that really resonated with me, actually. The term you wear a mask and your face grows to fit it, I think is something that deserves more thought that most people don't give. And so anyway, as you can see, go and sign up for £5 a month or using our promo code because it's our birthday today, 33% off, the promo code being birthday. Go and watch all of those because there are deep dives into Orwell's work. So when I start talking about Orwell and his work, you can see we are not new to the corpus of George Orwell. We know what we're talking about. And it turns out that Orwell was, quote, sadistic, misogynistic, homophobic, and sometimes violent. I mean, he did shoot an elephant.
And he also fought for the Spanish Republicans as well. So, yeah, he did conduct a lot of violence. Didn't he get shot in the neck in the Spanish Civil War?
He was wounded. I don't know where the wound was. So, anyway. So, as you can see, this comes from a biography that's written about his wife. And who says,
because this is part of the cultural revolution where we need to reframe all influential male figures from the perspective of the women in their lives.
Yes.
It's a pretty common trend at the moment.
You may recall that a few months ago we covered the feminist rewriting of 1984, which is, I mean, okay, if you don't understand the irony of this, then we'll just carry on.
They do. They just dislike what 1984 is warning against, and they go, well, we need to make it ours.
Yeah, that's totally
remember that when a woman got a chance to write a dystopia, she wrote, oh my God, what if women had to give birth to babies? That was the most terrifying thing she could think of.
Imagine.
I know.
Anyway, so Anna Funder is the woman who's written this biography of Eileen O'Shaughnessy, who is Orwell's wife, highlighting the contributions O'Shaughnessy made to his work, including helping to write Animal Farm. So one of his works she helped to write, we're told. But I love this kind of, well, I don't love it, but like, you know, this kind of character assassination is interesting because it's not like he died recently. He died way before any of the issues that have arisen in like the last 50 odd years or whatever.
He died in 1949.
Yeah, like, but the main issues that we're dealing with really sort of arose about 50 years ago. But even then they were quite small and have amplified in the last sort of decade or so. Right? There's no way Orwell could have predicted that this is where we are going to have been. What he was predicting were fairly reasonable things that he was saying in his works. And so it's like, you know, because in like, you know, the 70s or 80s, you still wouldn't expect Orwell to have been able to perceive that far down. And then in 2023, where we're in an actual lunatic asylum, it's not reasonable to think Orwell should have foreseen any of this. So it's like really long character assassination, a long arc of character assassination that we're dealing with here. But anyway, so according to Funder, the darkness that runs through 1984 is a reflection of Orwell's soul. And that's weird because you would have thought it would be a reflection of left-wing politics because that's expressly what it's a critique of.
It was the worry of what happens if authoritarian Stalinism were to come to England.
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
Yeah.
And at that sort of time in history, everybody was becoming more and more aware of how bad Stalinism was. Obviously, they hid it. The left-wing journalists hid it in the 1930s.
They were big fans of Stalin until it all came out and they were like, wow, is that really true?
Yeah, and understandably, given how dark Stalinism was, that's why 1984 is so dark.
Well, that's the point. Orwell is saying, look, actually, you don't realize how bad leftism is going to get. That's what he's saying. And that's why 1984 is as dark as it is. It's not so much of a reflection of Orwell, it's more a reflection of what you are. Which is, so it's just, okay, well, he's just this evil man, actually. And so, but it's the darkness in the soul. It's about, making you feel afraid of Orwell. This is how we describe things. We're not saying that his work's bad. We're saying he's sinister. He's evil.
Like so much else, it's supposed to give you a pre-built emotional reaction that doesn't come from you, but you've been programmed into feeling it.
Yep. And she just goes on and on about like all of this. Like, decency is such a core Orwellian value. He writes about it. It's the quality of the proles in 1984 that's going to save us. He wanted to be decent, to be seen as decent, by which he means a man of integrity, the same inside and out. Also, he used that word to refer to being heterosexual. He was enormously homophobic, but deeply attracted to men and not particularly interested in women sexually. Married to a woman. Was he gay?
George Orwell?
Yeah.
Pretty certain he wasn't.
Yeah, I've never seen that allegation before. But I think what this is really about is because he writes from a man's point of view. Not terribly surprising, given he's a man.
Also, if you're talking about dystopian novels that are a reflection of a lot of the political events that were going on in leftist politics in the early 20th century, other than maybe a few of the socially revolutionary women who were involved in the early Bolshevik movement, and the suffragettes, but that wasn't to do with socialism that was going on in Russia. Yeah, where are all the women?
Yeah, most of it's men. But she says he's a very complicated man. He's sadistic, misogynistic, homophobic, sometimes violent, and also brilliant. Like, I've read an unbelievable amount of Orwell's work. I've examined it and studied it in detail, and I don't recognize that characterization at all. I don't think he is sadistic. Whenever anything horrible is done to a character, it's never played up for pleasure, which is what sadism is. Nothing about his work comes across as hating women at all. In fact, he seems to characterize women in many different ways, broadly and deeply sometimes. And homophobic, I'm just like, okay, but when has he ever, like, maybe I just haven't read the commentary on gayness that Orwell's given at some point, but I'm just not aware of it. And like sometimes violent. Well, he's writing fiction books. He desperately wants to be decent, and wanting to be decent is an honorable thing, a noble thing. But writing a book like 1984, which is violent, misogynistic, sadistic, grim, and paranoid, is it grim and is it paranoid to think that leftism is going to create a 1984 style totalitarian dystopia? There were several in existence at the very time he wrote it.
Once again, this is nothing more than a hit piece. This is an emotional hit piece. It says here in the note I see here, decency is such a core Orwellian value. And I think that's part of the problem here, which is not just an Orwellian value, it's a British value.
Very much a British
As much as Orwell had his socialist leanings and as much as he sided with the wrong side in the Spanish Civil War, at base level, he was a British patriot.
He was an Englishman.
He was an English patriot who cared about the well-being of the English people. This is why, post-World War II, he was actively drawing up lists that he was trying to give to the British government, trying to name people that he perceived as conducting anti-British activities.
Based Orwell drawing up lists of the leftists.
Because there was something that changed in him throughout the 1940s from that idealism that he experienced in the 30s, where he basically became the first, alongside people like James Burnham, he became a reactionary post-liberal to a certain degree. And if he'd gone on to live a longer life, we might have seen even more of that as he got older. But that's what they're attacking here. They're attacking British decency. They're attacking English values.
But notice how they're like, decency is an Orwellian value. It's like, but it's not a left-wing value, is it? You guys don't value decency.
Their values are spite and petty resentment.
No, well, it's not necessarily. Anyway, right. So, that's just a manifestation of their values. But anyway, he's talking about the Soviet Union, obviously, but they ignore that. Funder is the author of a bestseller which noted that Orwell had a feminist mother and sisters, an aunt who ran a literary salon, and this fabulous, intelligent, strong wife And in his work, he absolutely ignores women. He is a misogynist. Does he ignore women, though? There are women in 1984.
Isn't 1984 a love story?
Yes.
Very dark one, but still.
I mean, Animal Farm is about animals. So there are
male animals.
There's one man, there's the farmer. But like, okay, the farmer, why isn't it the farmer's wife or the female farmer, I guess? But like, Animal Farm's mostly not humans, so okay. I guess he is technically ignoring women, and I guess from a feminist perspective, that makes him a misogynist. And so essentially, what she's coming to is men aren't allowed to write about their own stuff. If you're not writing from the perspective of a woman, well, that's off. So anyway, in one of the letters that O'Shaughnessy wrote to her friend, she says that she wanted to visit this friend, but found it difficult because Orwell was ill, requiring her to stay home and tend him, or contact her when she was away, requesting that she come home again. And she cited Thunder, the woman who wrote this book, cited this as evidence that O'Shaughnessy was being kept in a controlling environment. Right. Is that controlling? You've got to help your husband because he's sick. Ah, yes. Typical evil male controlling. Helping your ailing husband. Why?
The man died of tuberculosis.
Yeah, I know. It's like, he's so controlling. He wants me to come and help him because he's dying of TB. Like, what are you talking about?
This is absurd.
Yes. But this is not the only book this year to reassess Orwell through a feminist lens. Sandra Newman has written Julia, which retells 1984 through the eyes of its main female character. Newman was invited by the Orwell estate to take on the project. She absolutely idolized the author when she was younger, having read his political works, and then you read his fiction, particularly in 1984, and that hatred of women is really extreme. So there are a couple of bits in 1984 that I understand they would be able to. He talks about how the compliance of women with the regime, which is just something that happened in the
which women like Sandra Newman are an explicit example of with the current regime that we live under.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. There are plenty.
That's a great point.
Plenty of based women out there. Plenty of based women watching this right now. But women as a group tend to be much more compliant and emotionally susceptible to arguments made from a kind of sentimentality.
Yep.
Certainly much more so than men are, although there are plenty of men who are more than willing to go along with the emotional trends.
But she says there are 3 different points in the book where Winston fantasizes about murdering a woman. At one point, he thinks about raping and then murdering Julia. It's not really treated as strange, and he's still the hero. It's like, right. No. You are given a look, and this is what character development is, into the conflicted mind of a person who is not sure what they are actually doing. So the point of Winston, he doesn't know why he's breaking out of the conditioning. He doesn't know why he's doing this. It's just wrong, and he knows it's wrong. And so what he's trying to show you is that Winston is in a difficult spot. He's a confused man. Things are difficult for Winston to process. And obviously he doesn't murder and rape Julia. So it's a fleeting thought where he's like, okay, I don't understand why I'm thinking this. And it's difficult for him to deal with. This shows that he is vulnerable and human, not that he is not the hero and we must disavow and condemn him. Like a normal person would say, wow, that was really intense and well written. That's fascinating. No, this person's come away, George Orwell hates women.
That's the only perspective these people will ever have.
Yes. However, Newman said her understanding of Orwell was influenced by reading about something from one of his former girlfriends, who said that he did not hate women, but simply did not think they were important. It's like, well, you're talking to an ex-girlfriend here, right? And
even the ex-girlfriend said that he didn't hate them.
Yeah, exactly. He doesn't hate women, you feminist freak. What is wrong with you? And he's writing a fiction that you make up things that aren't real in fictions.
Also, that's such a blanket statement, did not think that they were important. Obviously, women are important. What's the context in what he was saying? Did he mean...
Well, I've got a context here, actually.
Oh, okay,
right?
all right.
When he wrote a serious novel, it couldn't be about women. A very strange point of view from a man whose family was full of serious intellectual women. It's like, okay, so he just wrote a novel that just wasn't about women. He spoke from his own position and women most effective. That's the feminist view.
Yeah.
Pathetic.
If you appreciated that episode from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as this video between Carl and Shad on a discussion about dadism. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Twitter at lotuseaters_com on Twitter. Thank you and goodbye.